HIV or human immunodeficiency virus is a virus that targets cells in the immune system. This is a viral HIV virus which targets the immune system. Over time, the immune system begins to fail, which is called immunodeficiency, and this failure over time increases the risk of infections and tumors that a healthy immune system would usually be able to fend off. These are the other infections which causes these complications are referred to as AIDS or acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Now there are two distinct types of HIV, which is the HIV 1 and HIV 2. HIV 1 is mostly occurred in worldwide, and HIV 2 is mostly occurred in Western Africa. HIV 1 is more commonly associated with AIDS, and HIV 2 is more rarely associated with the AIDS. Now we come towards the pathogenesis of AIDS. What is the pathogenesis of AIDS? Alright, HIV targets CD4 cell, means that cells that have this specific molecule called CD4 on their membrane. Macrophages, T helper cells and dendritic cells are all involved in the immune response and all have CD4 molecules, therefore they can be targeted by HIV. The CD4 molecules help these cells attach to and communicate with other immune cells, which is particularly important when the cells are laughing attacks against foreign pathogens. So this little molecule is pretty important for our immune system, but it's also extremely important for HIV. Now this is a cell membrane. HIV targets and attaches to the CD4 molecule via a protein called glycoprotein 120 found on its envelope. This is a virus protein. This is a virus, and this is a cell membrane. The virus use glycoprotein 120 to attach to another receptor called co-receptor. Like this. Co-receptors. HIV needs to bind to both the CD4 molecule and a co-receptor to get inside the cell. The most common co-receptors that HIV use are the CXCR4 co-receptor, which is found mainly on T cells, or the CRR5 co-receptor, which is found on T cell macrophages monocytes. These co-receptors are important that some people with homozygous genetic mutations. What is homozygous genetic mutations? These are the resistance immunity, and the heterozygous mutation, which is a slower disease progression. Now for those without a mutation, through once HIV binds, it gains access to the cell. HIV is a single-stranded positive sense enveloped RNA retrovirus, meaning that it injects its single strand of RNA into a T helper cell. The retro part of retrovirus is not referring to its style but refers to its needing to use an enzyme called reverse transcriptase to transcribe a complementary double strand piece of proviral DNA. Proviral just means that it's ready to be integrated into the host DNA, so it enters the helper T cell's nucleus and pops itself into cell's DNA ready to be transcribed into new viruses. Pretty sneaky, like here's the actual sneaky part. When the immune cells become activated, they start in transcribing and translating proteins needed for the immune response. Ironically, this means that whenever the immune cell is exposed to something that causes it to start up an immune response, like an infection, the immune cells ends up inadvertently transcribing and translating new HIV viruses which bud off from the cell membrane to infect more cells. Very sneaky indeed. One thing to know is that HIV is notorious for making errors when it replicates, and that during an infection, it can mutate to create slightly different strains of viruses. These viruses are still considered HIV but behave slightly significantly from each other and target different cells in the host. In fact, the host cell preference is called viral tropism. So let's start with HIV entering the body through sexual intercourse, which is how it typically spreads from one human to another human. At this early point during what we call acute infection, the R5 strain of HIV, which binds to the CCR5 co-receptor, will get into macrophages, dendritic cells and T cell. Usually dendritic cells hanging out in the epithelial or mucosal tissue. These cells bind to that, while this is a dendritic cell which hanging out in the epithelial mucosal tissue where the virus entered the body, captured the virus and migrate to the lymph nodes where a lot of immune cells live, and the R5 strain of HIV essentially has a field day infecting T helper cells, macrophages and more dendritic cells, which leads to a big spike in HIV replication and the amount of viruses found in the patient's blood. Then AIDS defining conditions or symptoms. The AIDS defining conditions or symptoms are the recurrent bacterial pneumonia, pneumocystis, pneumonia and fungal infections like candidiasis of the esophagus. Other conditions include certain tumors and malignancies like Kaposi sarcoma, which causes lesions on the skin and other soft tissues, and primary lymphoma of the brain. This is the immune system finally fends off. Now it comes towards the treatment of HIV. What is the treatment of HIV? Treatment is with antiretroviral therapy. Antiretroviral therapy is not a single medicine but a combination of medicines that are known as the HIV regimen. These help slow down HIV replication, which gives the immune system a chance to recover.